Hey, this is Sky. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Let's talk about men in mental health. So first, let's just get a little snapshot of what the industry is about. I don't want to go into it too long. I don't have a bunch of statistics in front of me, so we're just going to kind of talk off the cuff here. The mental health industry used to be male-dominated, and Sigmund Freud and all that kind of thing, and the professors, the students, the industry itself was dominated by men, and that has become less so over the years, which is probably a good thing to bring women into the industry and even it out a little bit. But in recent years, last generation, the mental health field has been dominated by women. So it's gone the other way. Whereas, 100 years ago, it was completely dominated by men. Now, today in 2023, it's completely dominated by women. And I don't want to talk in all or nothing terms, but you go to any college campus anywhere in America, I would say anywhere in the Western world, Europe, Canada, Australia, the US, anywhere in the Western world, you go to a college or university campus, go into a psychology class, and it's going to be mostly women. It's going to be a woman professor. Most of the professors are women. Most of the practicing psychologists these days are women. It's harder and harder to find a man to go see if you're interested in seeing a psychiatrist. When I went to 3 different psychiatrists. I saw 1 woman and 2 men. And I ended up sticking with the last guy for about 6 years because we clicked and he was a good dude. I do remember when I had 1 or 2 visits with the woman. She was a military psychiatrist, had been a military psychiatrist for 30 years and then had retired and had her own practice, and she was an expert in diagnosing PTSD. She was the first one to diagnose me with PTSD. She diagnosed me as having all the symptoms. Severe case. It's not that I was going in there to talk about men issues. And she had been a psychiatrist that was used to talking to combat soldiers. So it's not like I could scare her away with my stories of blood and guts. But maybe it was one-sided. I found it hard to relate to her. She looked at me with an empty stare like she didn't get it. The other 2 guys, when I talked about the same issues, they got it. They understood it. They knew exactly where I was coming from. And she didn't seem to, and I just kind of passed it off. Well, maybe it's just a woman thing. Some things that a woman doesn't get about a man and never will. Only men get. A man can understand a certain look in another man's eyes that a woman will never understand. You take all the men out of the industry, and where are we left with? A bunch of feminist, men-hating women who are going to sit there and listen to you with judgment, and that's kind of what's going on. I hate to sound so negative about it, but men are victim blamed these days. We're treated differently than women when it comes to being patients in the mental health field. And I'm not trying to cry about this or whine about this. Oh, boo-hoo, men have it so bad. We're victims. But we're victim blamed when something happens with the man. If we have depression, it's looked at as our fault for some reason. We're mostly told, well, just man up, toughen up, stop being such a baby, stop being such a pussy. Whereas when a woman says she has depression, it's like, oh man, that's terrible. It's a serious condition. This is a diagnosable mental condition that is like a broken arm. Depression is scientific, and you have it, and there's a course of correction. We can put you on drugs. We got to get on top of this because depression is terrible. It's this whole thing. When a man gets it, it's like, just toughen up. Snap out of it. Stop being such a bitch. So that's victim blaming. It's always our own fault. Oh, you probably did this to yourself. You got yourself into this. You get mugged on the street. It's probably your own fault. What were you doing on that street? What, were you wearing a fancy watch or something? Some fancy clothes? You idiot. You're victim blamed if something happens to you as a man. A woman, she gets mugged on the same street, and people are going to be like, you stupid bitch, what are you even doing around there? The fuck are you thinking? No, they're like, oh, that's so terrible. We got to do something. And I'm not trying to whine about this stuff, like as if men have it so bad in our society. I get it, we're in a patriarchy, right? I mean, we're talking about men and mental health, and it's become a women-dominated field. And there's this notion called beta bias. Beta bias. There's alpha bias, there's beta bias. Beta bias is what we have now. Alpha bias may have been what we had 100 years ago, when Sigmund Freud was the Michael Jordan of psychologists. And of course, most everything he's said has been debunked at this point. That's why, and I must be critical of Jordan Peterson. I love Jordan Peterson. And all you guys out there that want to run to his defense, I'm with you. I love the guy. I've watched everything he's ever done, probably twice. He's changed my life. But he's a classical Freudian psychiatrist, and he believes in an old world view that has been debunked. There's lots of the Freudian stuff which is just an eye roll and people laugh at. We know it's just his own twisted mommy issues. The guy was a weird motherfucker. But nonetheless, back in those days, we had what was called alpha bias, because the whole industry, mental health industry, was dominated by men, and it was really just a man's world, and they thought in these very archaic kind of ways. You got to remember that Freudian was from the Victorian age. Well, they put leeches on you and bled you out and shit. We've debunked all his shit. Not all of it, but a lot of it. But what we have now, I'm not saying it's any better. Oh, don't get me wrong. We have the exact opposite. We have what's called beta bias. We've gone the other way, where we're biased towards the beta. It's a female mindset, a feminine-dominated philosophy. What it does, what a beta bias is, more specifically, if you're still not understanding it, is it minimizes the differences between men and women. So whereas an alpha bias emphasized the difference between men and women. I'm like this because I'm a man. You're like this because you're a woman. Men and women are different. We think different. We're raised different. We have different brain structure. That was alpha bias. Beta bias, since the 70s at least, since the hippies took over, it's minimized the differences between men and women, to where now it's scientifically thought that men and women are pretty much exactly the same. The only thing that makes us different is the bits and pieces on the outside, right? And I'm not going to get into your little politics. I personally find that to be bullshit. I'm more of an alpha bias than a beta bias. I don't think that we're the same. I don't think that we should minimize the differences between men and women, especially when we're talking about mental health, because we have different issues. We have different ways of seeing the world. We have different ways of reacting. We're genetically encoded differently because of our roles, our social roles for the last million years. Let's just put it in perspective for you guys. I mean, men have a suicide rate, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's like 3 times higher than women. Women have a higher, it's interesting actually, because women have a higher depression rate. So women get diagnosed with depression more than men. How are you doing? I'm depressed. The answer to that question is women answer depressed more than men do. A lot of men are like, well, I'm fine. And we could argue about, well, men are taught to say they're fine. So men may be suppressing their emotions or their feelings or whatever. That's a different argument. Women have been diagnosed as having depression more than men. It's not that it's a competition. But men are 3 times higher in the suicide rate. Who's committing suicide out there? I know a guy who drives the bodies around. He works for the morgue. He picks up the bodies. You kill yourself in this town, you get shot in this town, you die in this town. He's the guy that comes pick you up. And he tells me, he knows, there's 12 to 15 suicides every day, 7 days a week in this small town. I live in a small town in the South. I'm not in a big city like you guys. I live in a little small redneck town. We got 12 suicides, 15 suicides daily, every day, all men. Homelessness, 2 times higher. Who's homeless? Go drive around your town. Go drive through the shanty town, the homeless encampment. Who's there? Men. Men. All men. Mostly all men. I was homeless twice. You don't have to tell me. It's mostly men on the streets. Prison population, it's like 10 times higher. Men. Who's in prison? Men. We got millions of people in prison, and most all of them are men. We got these prisons stacked with bunks 5 high. They don't even put them in cells anymore. They put them out in dormitories. They got prison cells that are supposed to be 2-man cells with 5 motherfuckers in it. It's overcrowded like crazy. You could do your whole time just sleeping in a fucking bunk in a hallway. Addiction rate, it's like 5 times higher. Who are the junkies? Who's the ones that are slamming up all the dope? Where's all that fentanyl going? Who was buying all the crack? It's not your mama, it's your daddy. We have a problem with men. We do. This is a serious, serious problem. I could talk about the male problem in our society for 2 hours. There's tens of thousands of videos on this going in different directions. I don't know if I have a solution for you. But we need to figure out a way as men to work on each other. If the mental health industry is going to forsake us and it's just going to be for women, then we need to step up and work on each other. Maybe men's groups is a good idea. Maybe I should start a men's group for my warriors and we could meet, whether on a video chat or some shit. I hate fucking video chats. I wish we could do it in person. I don't know. It's all food for thought. Tell me what you think.